Few creatures in Tolkien's legendarium inspire as much fear as the Balrogs. Towering beings of shadow and flame, they possessed incredible strength, wielded weapons engulfed in fire, and were feared even by the greatest elven warriors. Entire armies fled at their approach, mighty kingdoms fell before them, and during the Third Age, a single Balrog was enough to drive an ancient dwarven kingdom into ruin. Yet despite their terrifying appearance, the Balrogs were not monsters born from darkness. Like Gandalf and Sauron, they began their existence as divine spirits before choosing to follow the first Dark Lord, Morgoth. Hi everyone, and welcome to Friend of the Rings. In today's video, we will explore the complete history of the Balrogs, from their origins before the creation of the world to their role in the First Age, their greatest leader, and the last surviving Balrog that confronted the Fellowship in the depths of Moria. Long before elves, dwarves, or men awoke in Middle-earth, there existed only Eru Ilúvatar and the Ainur, powerful spiritual beings created from his thought. Among them was Melkor, the mightiest of all the Ainur, whose desire for absolute power eventually led him to rebel against his creator. But Melkor did not stand alone. Many lesser spirits were drawn to his strength and promises of greatness, abandoning the harmony of Ilúvatar's design to become his followers. Among the most powerful of these were the beings who would later become known as the Balrogs. Like Sauron, the Balrogs belonged to the Order of the Maiar. They were not physical creatures by nature, but immortal spirits capable of taking visible form. While many Maiar choose to serve the Valar and help shape the world, others willingly followed Melkor into darkness. Over time, their original nature became twisted by his influence. They clothed themselves into bodies of shadow and living fire, until their terrifying appearance reflected the corruption within. Their very presence inspired fear, and wherever they walked, flames and darkness seemed to accompany them. The elves gave these beings the name Valaraukar, meaning demons of power, though they would become far better known by the Sindarin name Balrog, which simply means demon of might. The title was fitting. Unlike orcs or trolls, Balrogs were not mindless servants or creatures bred for war. They were intelligent, immensely powerful Maiar who acted as Morgoth's generals, bodyguards, and champions. They commanded armies, inspired terror on the battlefield, and often turned the tide of entire wars through their own very presence. Exactly how many Balrogs existed has long been a subject of discussion among Tolkien's fans. In Tolkien's earliest writings, he imagined hundreds or even thousands fighting in Morgoth's armies. However, as his legendarium evolved, he significantly reduced their number. In his later writings, Tolkien suggested there were never more than 7 Balrogs in existence. Although he never gave a definitive number, most readers and scholars accept this later idea, making each Balrog an exceptionally rare and formidable servant of Morgoth rather than a common battlefield commander. During the First Age, the Balrogs dwelled primarily within Angband, Morgoth's immense fortress beneath the Iron Mountains in the north of Beleriand. Hidden within its fiery halls, they remained beside their master until he chose to unleash them upon his enemies. Unlike orcs, who could be replaced after every battle, the Balrogs represented Morgoth's greatest military assets. He committed them only when overwhelming force was required, and when they finally entered the battle, the outcome was often decided within moments. The first great demonstration of their power came during the Dagor Nuin Gilead, the battle under the stars. Freshly arrived in Middle-earth, Feanor pushed Morgoth's retreating orcs with unmatched fury, believing victory to be within his grasp. But the retreat was a trap. Morgoth released the Balrogs from Angband, surrounding the Elven King before his army could reach him. Although Feanor fought with extraordinary courage, even he could not withstand multiple Balrogs at once. Mortally wounded, he was carried from the battlefield, dying shortly afterward. Ironically, the greatest craftsman among the elves, creator of the Silmarils, became the first of many legendary heroes to fall before Morgoth's deadliest servants. From that moment onward, the Balrogs became symbols of inevitable destruction. Wherever they appeared, hope rapidly faded, for the Free Peoples knew they were facing opponents unlike any other. Yet among all these terrifying beings, one stood above the rest. He was the Lord of the Balrogs, Morgoth's greatest captain after Sauron, and one of the most feared warriors ever to walk Middle-earth. His name was Gothmog. Among all the Balrogs, Gothmog was by far the greatest. As Lord of the Balrogs and Morgoth's High Captain, he ranked among the Dark Lord's most trusted servants, second only to Sauron in power and authority. Throughout the First Age, Gothmog became the terror of the battlefield, leading Morgoth's armies in many of the greatest conflicts against the elves. His reputation was earned through some of the most decisive victories of the age. During the near-Ninth Arnoediad, the Battle of Unnumbered Tears, Morgoth's forces crushed the combined armies of elves, men, and dwarves in one of the greatest defeats ever suffered by the Free Peoples. In the midst of the fighting, Gothmog personally slew Fingon, the High King of the Noldor, after he became surrounded by enemies. With the death of Fingon, the hopes of the elves were shattered, and Morgoth's dominance over Beleriand grew stronger than ever. Years later came the fall of Gondolin, the greatest hidden elven kingdom of the First Age. After centuries of secrecy, Morgoth finally discovered the city location through betrayal and launched a massive assault unlike any before. Dragons, orcs, ghouls, and Balrogs poured into Gondolin, bringing destruction to one of the most beautiful cities ever built. During the desperate defense of the city, Gothmog faced Ecthelion, Lord of the Fountain, in one of Tolkien's most memorable duels. Although Ecthelion ultimately cast Gothmog into the King's Fountain, killing the Lord of the Balrogs, he gave his own life in the process. It was a bittersweet victory, achieved only through extraordinary sacrifice, and one that perfectly reflects the tragic heroism found throughout the First Age. The remaining Balrogs continued to serve Morgoth until the War of Wrath, when the Valar finally marched against Angband to end his reign forever. The conflict lasted for decades and devastated much of Beleriand, sinking large parts of the continent beneath the sea. During Morgoth's final defeat, most of the surviving Balrogs were destroyed, yet not all of them perished. At least one escaped the destruction of Angband, fleeing deep beneath the roots of the Misty Mountains, where it remained hidden from the world for thousands of years. As the Second Age passed into the Third, the memory of the Balrogs faded into legend. Few believed that any still survived, but deep beneath the mountains, one of Morgoth's ancient servants awaited in silence, undisturbed since the fall of his master. Everything changed during the year 1980 of the Third Age. While expanding the ancient dwarven kingdom of Khazad-dûm, the dwarves dug even deeper in search of Mithril, the priceless silver-like metal found nowhere else in Middle-earth. In doing so, they awakened the slumbering Balrog. The creature emerged from the darkness in a storm of shadow and fire, killing during the 6th and, the following year, his son, Nain I. The once great kingdom was abandoned, earning the Balrog's name by which it would be forever remembered, Durin's Bane. For nearly 5 centuries, the halls of Moria remained deserted, haunted only by orcs and the terrible presence lurking in its depths. It was there, during the War of the Ring, that the Fellowship unknowingly crossed paths with the last known Balrog in Middle-earth. After pursuing them through the mines, the creature confronted Gandalf upon the bridge of Khazad-dûm. The wizard's famous declaration, "You shall not pass," marked the beginning of one of the greatest duels in Tolkien's legendarium. Their battle did not end at the bridge. Locked together, Gandalf and the Balrog fell into the abyss beneath Moria, before continuing the struggle through the deepest caverns of the mountain, and eventually ascending the endless stair to the peak of Zirak-Zigil. There they fought for days, surrounded by storm and lightning, until Gandalf finally defeated Durin's Bane. Exhausted by the battle, he too died, only to be sent back by Eru Ilúvatar as Gandalf the White, completing one of the most significant transformations in The Lord of the Rings. Unlike the One Ring or the Silmarils, the Balrogs were never the central focus of Tolkien's stories. Yet every time one appeared, history changed. They brought about the death of Fëanor, the fall of Gondolin, the ruin of Khazad-dûm, and the transformation of Gandalf himself. Their appearances are remarkably few, but each one marks a turning point in the history of Middle-earth. Perhaps that is what makes the Balrog so unforgettable. They are not simply monsters of fire and shadow, but fallen Maiar, beings who, like Sauron, chose power over wisdom and became eternal servants of darkness. Even after Morgoth's defeat, their legacy endured for thousands of years, reminding the peoples of Middle-earth that some of the greatest evils are never truly forgotten. Thank you so much for watching. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe to Friend of the Rings for more videos of Tolkien's world. Until next time.